The Gambits, Part 1. Frequently, Mother would purchase a lot of pre-packaged pasta in bulk in order to stock up for the war. My parents were swimming in debt as a result, for the price of food had gone up over the last months prior. They would bankrupt their credit cards and bought a new one to keep us fed so we could have the clothes on our backs and other things considered to be bare basics. At dinner time, Mother would frequently make spaghetti and meatballs for dinner. We would get tired of it as a result. "Don't play with your pasta, Kovo," my father fussed, while Mother was too busy sticking her nose in a romance novel to pay attention to the noodles being tossed across the table into our fine china cabinet. However, Father would frequently bring up other issues to Mother's dismay. Kovo did not seem to care one way or the other. There had been 3 casualties in the war so far. "Have you heard about this one guy that got awards in?" Father began to say before he was cut off by Mother. "Shut up, Harold," Mother said. "Can it? This is important news." "Maybe so," Mother said, then put her book down and gave Father a scowling face. Then she added, "But we don't need to gross out the children. They need to eat as much as they can so they can concentrate on schoolwork. You want Kovo to go to college, right? And what about Samantha? You want her to remain a star student, right?" "I'm 17, Mom. I think I'll be fine," Kovo chimed in. "If you're 17, act like it by not slinging meatballs at me," Father said. "That's enough, Harold. Apparently he can't help himself," Mother said. "Well, that's true." "Fuck you, Dad." "No, fuck you. Let's all just eat silently," I proposed, although everyone else just laughed it off. "So, Sammy, are you still having a hard time with Ruby?" Father asked, though he probably knew what the answer would be. Ever since the beginning of the school year, me and her kind of had issues, though it had gotten worse. "May I talk about it after dinner?" I requested. "Sure, just know that if she's hurting you, I can beat her up for you," Father said. I asked if I could be excused, and then I went to bed to make the last-minute correction on my math and science. The next morning, my older brother poured a bucket of water over me to wake me up for school, just like I asked. "Thanks, Kovo," I said and gave him a hug. Over the past 2 weeks, I had the tendency to sleep in late and miss the bus. I had to rush to school. At least school was only about a mile away, unlike a lot of students that went to Sauna Creek Elementary. When I walked from class to class, when the bell rang to go to 6th period, I hurried up to go to the restroom so that I can avoid Ruby and get to class on time, of which my efforts were in vain. It was so uncommon for Ruby to be only slightly mean, but these past 2 weeks had been the worst. The week before, she picked me up and threw me head first into the bathroom wall. I carefully tried to avoid her, but it was no use. I was pushed to the floor again, and then I was picked up and thrown headfirst into the bathroom wall once again. Honestly, I'm surprised my grades have not suffered much more than they had. You would think I'd have gotten brain damage. Then the bell rang. "See ya, baby," Ruby said, in contradiction to how she treated me. I waited until Ruby left the restroom and finally got the chance to use it myself. On those 2 days, I got a tardy slip because I was too afraid to come to class. I did not want to cause any more trouble, and I certainly did not want any cute boys to see me red. So I pulled myself up by my bootstraps once I got off the toilet and then walked to class. Once I arrived, I was met with a pleasant surprise. "Samantha, this is the 2nd time you've been late. I shall ask you the question I was going to ask Ruby. What is the capital of Wisconsin?" "Madison." Ruby's girlfriend said before I had the chance to answer, of which Ruby gave her a high five. Although correct, Samantha was the one that needed to answer, the teacher said, and then Ruby stuck her tongue out at me. Once the bell rang, most of the students left, but my teacher asked me to stay behind to answer a question of which I was hesitant to answer. Why have you been late to class, Sammy? You used to be punctual all the time, the teacher asked. If I said, how would I know I would not get in trouble for ringing about the exchange students? You don't have to curse, Sammy. You can feel safe to tell me anything. I know something is wrong, but the day before today you came in looking beat up. Are you still asking me the question even though I looked like that? I'm sorry. I gave her a slight disgruntled look and then told her before class I was hurt by Ruby and her girlfriends. Oh, I see. The teacher said she went ahead and sent me home and was nice enough not to give me a detention. How would I have known that, though? Once I got home and opened the door into the living room, I could see my dad watching the evening news, and could smell my mother cooking the usual meal for us to eat tonight. Oh, hello, honey. How was school? Father asked. It was okay, I guess, I said, darting my eyes back and forth. Are you sure? Did something happen at school again? I said, I'm fine. I yelled at him, and then went to my room and slammed the door. My father knocked on my door and gently asked if I was okay. Could I have a moment to myself? Sure. The next day at school, when I arrived in class, I found a letter directed to me in my desk. I had no idea who sent the letter to me. Maybe a hot guy that was a little shy to tell it to my face. I knew I had to hide it, so I quickly put it in my backpack until lunch. As I sat at the lunch table and began to eat it, I packed for myself and took the letter I had out of my backpack. I carefully tore it open and read the contents. Dear Samantha, by the time you get this letter, you only have 24 hours till I'm going to kill you. Say your prayers. Sincerely, Ruby. I looked at the letter and then wondered who wrote it. I then proceeded to finish my lunch and kept a close eye on my surroundings. Once I got back into class, I asked the teacher if I could talk to her privately outside the classroom, because I was scared that whoever wrote the letter would hear me. What's wrong, Sammy? You look pale and you're crying. I think Ruby sent me a death threat. See, it matches her handwriting. Wait, what? I'll take this up with the vice principal right away. I thought. Hook, line, and sinker. It's gone perfectly. Ruby's going to be gone in no time. When I got home, I was able to finally relax with a feeling of accomplishment. Although dinner was the same as always, because of the mood I was in, it felt fresh and new. There was nothing like the smell of victory and tomato sauce. The next morning I found that my father, watching the morning news in Kovo, was oddly intense. What is going on, Dad, in Kovo? Why did you not drive to school yet? We are going to have to move to a different neighborhood. The school you guys used to go to was blown up by the Northern Army. We received a relocation notice in the mail. I wonder if my teacher is okay. I hate to tell you this, Sammy, but I think she died in the explosion. When I drove by the school around 3 a.m., your teacher's car was oddly still there. If she was still there, I think she died in the explosion, Father told me. I wondered why she would still be there. She normally left right after. I frequently have a substitute because of her health problems. I reflected back to when I first had my conversation with her. There was a conversation where I first told her what was going on. You don't have to curse at me, Sammy. You can feel safe to tell me anything. I'm your friend. You're only paid to be my friend, was my final words to her, and then I ran out of the classroom. In another conversation, I reflected back to when I told her about the letter I received from Ruby. What's wrong, Sammy? You look pale and you're crying. I think Ruby sent me a death threat. See, it matches her handwriting. I wanted to use the letter as a get out of school in the heat of a school bus panic. But now I wonder if I did the right thing. After all, the teacher was truly asking out of concern. I realize that now. The Gambits. Samantha's Gambit, Part 2. It was the next month after I lost my teacher during the explosion. For whatever reason, it took me a while to process that she was gone from my life forever. Had I gotten away with setting up my bully to go to an alternative school? The night felt more chilly. My parents had gotten a new air conditioning unit. All the months of hot weather being no different inside, and suddenly the heat had come to an end. Something to celebrate. Kovo finally figured out how to stop throwing meatballs at me at dinner time, and I was no longer the most mature person in the house. But I was still the only one, quiet as a mouse. Yet another comfort, perhaps. So how was school? My mother asked. I wasn't sure what answer to give her. The war was still going on even in the north. I played with my spaghetti with my fork. It was fine, a little boring. I met a new friend today. I smiled a smile I had not had in a long time. You're not dating boys, are you? Mother asked. Well, of course she would assume that, but that was not it at all. She gave me a cross look, telling me I should eat my food, of which I merely stared. Oh, no, a new friend of mine, Susie, and another friend, Rachel. Father looked at me and my brother's mother and tilted his glasses forward. She played a flute at lunch today, a sound of music I had not heard in months. I'd soon come to find out in other circumstances that her flute was broken by her headmate at the orphanage, and that was the last sound of tender and soft music. I said that I could buy her a flute, and Rachel took the pressure off, but when Susie offered, at that point she couldn't refuse. Next week she got a new one. My old one was a gift from my mother, she said, as if her mother were one of the victims in the war. Then placed it between her lips, but I can remember her with this. Then played the flute all afternoon. Months came and went. It is a cold midnight hour. Always midnight, the window glass shattered into the wind. The road, mostly abandoned, sang a song of a distant time when cars along the intersections were still busy from rush hour traffic. The ghosts of another time wander the planet. Where is Mommy? Where is Daddy? Or Kovo, I wonder, where Susie and Rachel have ran off to. It's so cold, Mom. Those parasite men want to feel along my bones. I need a new dress. 2 holes that form into eyes remind me that I forgot to sew my dress. I wonder if Susie and Rachel are in a bomb shelter together. After Susie's dad was arrested by the dream scanners, the regular cops said she and her little brother didn't have to live with them anymore since her mother died. And Rachel, she must be playing her new flute somewhere. I have an old storybook read to me when I was small. The story of the young shadow, a long scene on the wall. At times I felt like the shadow on the wall, and other times not as noticeable. I remember the last time we fought together and it was over spaghetti. Kovo still never grew any manners, and now in my 20th year, I wonder where he is. I no longer see anyone I know. The gas stations were mostly completely empty of goods in this town called Sonic Creek. At times I hear noises in the night, the sound of men, women, and children under the earth. Yet the ground is much too hot for me to bear. I was never one for dialogue, although that doesn't change the fact that dialogue would be nice about now. Yesterday I met a strange man, yet he has not yet come back for me. I could barely see who he was. All I knew was that he wore a black jumpsuit and had the most red of eyes you would ever see. In my mind's eye, I see spaceships that fill the sky heading toward domes. During the war, there was a young woman named Eve, the man in the black suit would always comment on, and how he was always concerned about her recovery. Yet I have never seen this woman. She may not even exist, like Big Brother in classic dystopian novels written centuries previously. I am hungry, I am tired, and I want to cry, yet my eyes will not let me. I dream of death threats by my school bully, and yet somehow I don't think she survived the magnetic nuclear explosions, and severed heads that line the street with gold. The life of the planet-wide civil war between north and southern sections of the tidally locked living quarters. The Japanese, Chinese, and Koreans populated the side of the sun, and the Europeans, including the French and the Dutch, populated the side of the American colonists. Yet nobody is left to talk to me. I'm invisible as I ever was. I hear somebody, a girl perhaps. She scratches and feels around the cave, which I had visited searching through abandoned laboratories, where super soldiers underwent the trial of the 7 tiers, a mind control experiment where the 7 deadly sins are cleansed from their life. I hear a banging in a room cell. A giant figure with a stitched mouth reaches his hand out for me. In my mind, I dream of unicorns and fairies in distant kingdoms, a better life than here. I am only dust. Silence is one. I wake up in an abandoned town, not remembering how I got here. There was the man again who seemed concerned about my well-being. Does he not realize who he is? He was the one that explored the explosions of the electromagnetic biological weapons, and yet now he seems so different. It's almost as if he no longer remembers his name. He wonders why I don't answer his question. Have you seen this man? He's a security guard for MK731. MK71 was a merger between Unit 731 and MK Ultra, a black budget program related to aliens from other star systems, and designed to mind control people along with infected people with retroviruses that distributed LSD, their mind permanently altered from repeated forced ingestions. But it had other strange effects, yet I was immune from its destruction. I am not a parasite. I am human. It's been a few months since he helped me learn to read. My fears about him have somewhat subsided, but there's still that burning feeling inside me that somehow he's worse than the parasite men that surround me. I am on guard at all times around him, despite the love of him kissing my neck. "Why don't you say anything?" he said. I had no words for him. He killed many people. Any amount of sympathy I had for the man due to his amnesia was mired by all the deaths he was responsible for during the war that caused me to have to move from my hometown in the southern slipstream town along the tidally locked planet. Moving from one side of the desert world to the other side was bad enough, dealing with moving away from old friends, some of which would never make it up north, but even in the new life, I could not quite get used to the culture. Even with Susie and Rachel, and now as I wait nights until he comes home, it takes all the strength I have not to murder him with an axe. And yet he seems different around those they play at innocence. I continue this game partially to play with his heart, but also he's the only company I've got. I communicate words from time to time in his secure zero liability mail. I'm not exactly certain who he's worried about breaking into his communications. It's not like anybody besides the Parasite men will come and watch us as he reads me storybooks. My favorite story book I had kept since the end of the war. Well, he was company for me. He was also a lethal general, with Eve, the queen of the colonists of the north, and Adam, the king of the colonists to the south. The man ordered a purge of southern colonists that migrated to the new school district. And now I wait for sunlight. I sleep. He caresses me and kisses me as I weep. It was hard to speak up for myself for my own good, and yet, as he put in a magazine to load up his shotgun, as he fired bullets, the armor-piercing rounds seemed to bounce off the Parasite men. I was torn between him defending me and him knowing the truth that he was the alien and not me. I embraced the new colonist, the man from the stars. I went with him to visit the cave he was interested in that I had visited earlier, and then I found out the truth. Not only did Susie disappear into those ruins from years ago, she became just like those monsters the government Parasite men created. Susie was home. The Gambits. Silhouette Mound. With all the world's death, with all the world's new death, a new world begins. The death of stars burning bright, the universe feels that much emptier. Yet for I, wandering alone in the dark, I hunt the rats, I hunt the roaches, and comb out the lice from unkempt hair. This is the countdown to another life. The tale of a tomb unfilled, the story of a corpse brought back from the dead. This isn't the story of a teen romance or the story of girls having their tap dance at pretentious weddings. The story of the invisible one playing with cards like others do video games. At least until the Southern Army invaded my homeland, hope becoming fainter and life thinning out. I had been a sickly child whose mother died of radiation poisoning. I barely knew my father like others in my circles of trust. Yet now I have no eyes to see and no ears to hear. I feel only dust. The cave was dark and damp. This I knew quite well. I never liked caves growing up, yet now as I wander into the endless darkness, it is almost like being home again. See into the mind of my remote pathology, the pathology of the dead. With 2 antennae, I route the coordinates. Mental noise, colors of what I knew as red, green, and blue. Perhaps these might be telling me the coordinates to avoid. I am told there is a community of others like myself. Yet this hope is something I choose not to acknowledge. In the cave of the spider, in the cave of artificial light, in the cave of creatures destroyed by man's might, the room of men brainwashed to cleanse them of their guilt for their 7 sins, these sins a product of maniacal religion. The product of men with power complexes, the men who lopped the heads off heretics in times of old, the same sin that taunts the young, and breaks the bones of the olden, as the world bows toward its king. I sense another voice, a voice of someone familiar, someone who seems to have kept her humanity intact. I wish I could see her. I wonder what the world looks like. The world feels wet, the sounds permanently silent. I feel around the cave floor in order to reach the outside world. A land of desert, briefly terraformed by the original colonists that seeded our ancestors, the original humans. The original humans who fled from Earth at first in order to expand to the farthest reaches of the stars. I live in a world where radioactive rain burns my skin, yet my ability to regenerate has increased manifold since the times that I had been alive. The world of mutated wolves. The world of malfunctioning air vaults, and artificial oceans gradually becoming more shallow every thousands of years, at least until the world was swept under by the Great Virus. The virus effects were initially subtle, and nothing like what you might imagine in zombie Holocaust novels. Our intelligence remained while our energy was drained little by little, until eventually we developed a new kind of energy. For sake of comparison, it is like comparing matter to antimatter. Our energy, a new kind of anti-energy, motivated by some unknown family bond that bound us together. And yet, there I was in the darkness with no eyes to see. I wasn't sure what I was wearing. I was unsure of whether I was still wearing my dress. Rather the sound of groaning in the darkness, there was the sound of buzzing, and more buzzing. The sound could drive one mad until one got used to the communication. The Civil War created us, a war that split apart the original family bond between Adam and Eve. The original cyborgs first resurrected and their limbs automated for the false flag alien invasion on Earth. The king and the queen, the puppet and her mistress, King Adam. Black triangles filled the air of the second Earth, and I remembered as Samantha, me, and Susie tried to save as many people as we could from the infection. Yet it was no use. It was a new kind of self-abuse. One would gradually be eaten alive by the virus, but then eventually begin to control it and turn into a new breed of underground humanity. The humans that could survive radioactive sickness and travel in the darkness. No longer was it the time of guillotine guns and beheading women on the spot. Now is the world of perpetual fermentation of the self. I reached the world of the outside, having not been to it in so long a time. Within this world of radioactive rain, I follow a sense of someone that I had once known before. She was the one that had purchased me a flute, back when I lived in the orphanage, and my mistress snapped my inherited flute in half. I had played the flute too loudly on that particular night. While the mistress was not one for collective punishment, she jerked the flute out of my hand. And now as I reach her, she wonders what has happened to me. She comes over and hugs me. We embrace. I sense a man beside her. Do you remember me? Samantha, thank you for the flute. What happened to your face? You look like a bug. And behold, I put my hands on my face. I had no eyes. My fingers had suction cups. I traveled by sonar. I was a parasite. Do you recognize this man? Samantha whispered into my antenna. I cannot see him, yet I cannot sense him. He has a sinister presence. He is who you remember, and yet he cannot even remember his name. He doesn't remember anything at all. It was then that it suddenly dawned on me. They were referring to I, who was the person who had become so tainted by greed, yet still had the softness of sympathy for our Queen Eve, had been reduced to the mind of a child, the person with no memory of the past, who had undergone my own trial, the trial of the 7 sins. I was a silhouette.